Hey guys, what's going on? Blaine back for another Netflix review, and today I'm going to be talking about Jung-yi. Jung-yi is a Korean sci-fi film that tells the story of seo-hyun, a scientist employed by the Chronoid Corporation set in 22nd century Earth at a time when the planet is ravaged by the effects of climate change and world war. Although humanity has somewhat adjusted to this, the threat of war continues to be a problem. In order to control the outbreak of war and restore order to an already fallen world, Seo-hyun works tirelessly to replicate the brain of her comatose mother Jung-yi, a decorated soldier, in the hopes of creating a new soldier with her talent that could turn the tide of war. In doing so, Seo-hyun gradually uncovers a conspiracy that leaves her questioning what she does. This movie is about as generic as sci-fi can get, which is disappointing considering it was directed by the same director who made Train to Busan. It's not a terrible film per se, but there's so little that's unique or memorable about it that it's not worth discussing in depth. Although Young Seo-hyun is the main character of the story, her arc never really takes off until about 20 minutes into the movie. I thought she was a supporting character at first and kept waiting to see who the protagonist would be, and it wasn't until later that things started becoming more focused, and I just found myself asking why the movie took so long to properly introduce her. Weird pacing aside, she's an okay character. Seeing the length she goes to try and preserve her mother's memory while doing so in ethically ambiguous ways was interesting enough to keep me watching, and her actress does a good job at conveying the struggle she goes through in this regard. But for a main character, she just isn't fleshed out enough to bother caring about her beyond a general sense. Her backstory with cancer feels rushed and never really ties in with what happens in the story. She constantly felt like a supporting character that kept getting dragged into the spotlight, which felt odd in execution. As for her mother Jung-yi, she's also okay, if just as bland as her daughter. The movie has more to do with representations of her as opposed to the actual Jung-yi, which do a decent job of showing the different effects that Chronoid's experiments have on her, and there's a few flashbacks that show the relationship between mother and daughter, which is nice to see. However, the legend surrounding Jung-yi kind of falls flat. She's more or less the same sort of war hero personality that can be seen in other kinds of war stories, except she's only ever portrayed in one battle scene in the form of simulations, and it's shown along with her death and injury over and over again, so I never felt convinced that she was a true war hero. The other characters in the movie aren't even worth mentioning. They're either completely forgettable or too goofy to take seriously in a movie that otherwise does take itself seriously, as it should when its topic is about a post-apocalyptic world where humanity is struggling to survive. These types of characters and the moments they're involved in tended to cause tonal shifts that were at odds with the rest of the movie, or even the very scene they were in. There's one male character that acts like a complete idiot in the most dramatic moments in the story, and I just found myself wondering what was the point of this. The most disappointing thing about this movie is that it's yet another typical post-apocalyptic setting depicting wars with robots and climate change and humanity being forced to relocate and adapt. It's the same tired old template being rehashed once again, which leaves little to be excited about when watching it. Funnily enough though, the movie did actually subvert my expectations a little bit, and that I thought it was going to be another generic action movie like Warriors of Future was, but instead it ended up being more of a thought-provoking drama, and this did raise some interesting points over time. Everything in the story revolves around technology and human experimentation, and how both are respectively used and performed in unethical ways by corporations and militaries for their own gain. It raises a lot of intriguing questions once the story gets going, but unfortunately it only ever explores them at a surface level depth of observation. What bothered me about how the movie was structured wasn't that it's more of a drama instead of an action flick, but over how inconsistent its pacing is. It starts off with a bang in the form of an intense action sequence with Jung-yi, only for the movie to grind to a halt as characters talk and talk for what feels like ages. There's lots of dialogue setting up the movie's characters and world, exploration of ethics and science, some sort of inner conflict going on in the Chronoid company, and it's all just so boring. I don't mind when a movie is more pensive in nature, but rarely anything interesting happens to the characters until much later, which leaves the rest of the movie feeling lukewarm. And it's a shame because there are some cool action scenes thrown in to add some entertainment value. They feature a mix of brawling and gunfights, the action can be seen clearly, and there's a nice variety of robots involved to avoid some degree of repetition. The movie relies on CGI a lot, which can be annoying at times, but in general the action looks fine. I found myself being more impressed with the effort put into the production design of the movie. Everything from how the robots looked to the new ways of life everyone's forced to live was fascinating to see. Even though the movie's plot is generic, the world it depicts is still appealing to look at. Beyond all of this though, it just doesn't have a whole lot to say about the state of humanity's future and how manipulative corporations and militaries can be, and when it does, it never dives into it as deeply as it could. It almost feels like the movie's afraid to decide what kind of story it wants to tell, and that only makes it more frustrating to watch when taking its slow pacing into account. Overall, Jung-yi is an average sci-fi that is ambitious in some respects, but fails to leave a lasting impression. If you like science fiction stories that are more slow-paced and less fantastical in nature, and can handle slow pacing, you might enjoy watching this. I wish I had more to say about this movie, but it just didn't do anything for me. I like the direction it takes with its themes, and the world looks interesting, but the characters were bland and the story slow to a point where I couldn't bring myself to care about how it turned out. What did you think about this movie? Did you enjoy it more than I did, or were you also just as underwhelmed? Let me know in the comments below. Anyways guys, that's going to wrap up my review of Jung-yi. Thanks for watching this video, I hope you enjoyed it, and as always stay tuned for the next part, where next time I review the Norwegian war film, Narvik. Bye bye!